Hello, and welcome to Pagan Perspectives. This is a podcast where I take things that are happening in society and the world and approach them from an esoteric perspective and give you clarity from pagan mysticism, the history of esotericism and occultism, on what may be going on in our world and how we can relate to it in our lives. I'm Georgina Rose. I'm a perennialist and polytheist. And I would like to begin this with I have been quite sick for the past week. I had a sinus infection that led to an ear infection that led to my eardrum rupturing. And because of that, I haven't been able to blow my nose. And so my throat's all awful sounding. So if my voice sounds weird, that's what's going on. I really don't know how long this will last. I've been delaying recording for days because of it. But I wanted to get this episode out because I think this is a pertinent topic. So if I sound weird or if there's more editing done than normal, it's just because I have to cut around me drinking water so that I can keep recording. Regardless, though, I really want to talk about this because I actually saw something so alarming that, this was a topic that I was considering discussing for a while, but I had to put it at the top of the list. And that is artificial intelligence or AI. So, what I'm going to be discussing is the occult truth about AI or artificial intelligence. I will be saying AI for most of this podcast for short. Essentially, over the past, I would say, year and a half, AI has really become a part of our lives in a way that it has not in human history. I think this is a really historic moment, and I don't think the world is ever going to be quite the same after this. And, whenever anything changes in a major sense in the world, it means a lot for us spiritually, right? Those changes are not neutral. And when we choose to engage with AI, we are engaging in something that has spiritual ramifications. Because one of the greatest truths, no matter what paradigm, religion, school of thought, tradition you're a part of, is that everything is connected. There is no separation. As above, so below. The microcosm and the macrocosm, they overlap with each other, right? Basically, everything has a sort of connected nature. And thus, even things that we don't think of as spiritual have spiritual consequences and spiritual meanings. And they are things that we should consider. So AI is a major one because I am seeing people interact with it in directly spiritual ways. I think the technology itself has spiritual implications, and there's a number of things that are quite interesting. But yeah, I mean, people are let's be real, using AI in esoteric and occultic and mystic ways. They are interacting with it in spiritual ways, and I actually didn't realize how widespread this was until I saw this graphic. I probably should have saved it, but I remember basically what it was, and it was this infographic. It was cool if you guys could find it, of basically like the 100 top uses people have for ChatGPT, Grok, and all of those kind of like chatbot AIs. Like, what are they using them for? And the top reason was counseling or therapeutic advice. Basically, like in the past, people would have gone to like Reddit for their personal problems. They're now going to ChatGPT or other AI type software. And, pretty high on the list underneath that. I mean, there were a number of other things under that, like planning travel itineraries. I think that one makes a lot of sense. Though I will say early on, when ChatGPT first launched, I actually asked it for a unconventional date itinerary in New York City because I was still living in New York at that time, and it did suggest me to go to this park at night in like a very dangerous neighborhood. It was really funny. I actually started laughing. I was like, don't know about that one. But I know AI has gotten, of course, better than it was right when ChatGPT first launched. But there was a bunch of other things that made sense to me, like tell me who this celebrity is, whatever. But pretty close to the top of the list was spiritual advice and spiritual insight, religious insight. So people are in large numbers, enough to make it in the top 100 uses of chatbot AIs, asking about what to do spiritually, how to deal with spiritual things, and what like the meaning of life is, what God is, right? Like people are asking AI these questions. And there are many other spiritual uses of AI that I'm actually seeing people do already, but that's of course the big one. And I'm going to get into all the spiritual uses of AI pretty extensively in this podcast. But first, I think we need to start at the root of the conversation, which is what is AI? So, AI is an emerging new technology that is becoming increasingly widespread, that is essentially developing machine technological things, softwares that are able to kind of think and create on their own, right? They're able to, instead of just repeating things that are inputted, repeating code that already exists, create new information. They are typically given a large, wide set of data, and then from that, the machine develops its own way of thinking. Early AIs, some of them went really well, some of them went really poorly, but now we are living in the AI age. I mean, if you go on like Google and you Google like something, right, the first thing that comes up now is Google AI, which is an AI summary of basically all the Google search results of whatever you're looking up. Right. It's also like if you use any sort of like photo editing app to like make your pictures look good for Instagram, I know I do. I know most people I know do. They often have like built-in AI. Like I, edit my photos like everyone else does on the internet. If you guys didn't know, photos on the internet are edited. Sorry to tell you this, but it actually, the one that I use has this filter, and I haven't been using it because I did use it once and it really freaked me out because it made me look really weird. Where AI edits your photos for you. And I thought the result looked really artificial. I did not like it, but I did see what it is. So like literally AI is fully integrated into the internet. And I will display my bias. I generally, when a new technology comes out, I have that kind of instinctive dislike, this instinctive fear or paranoia. Like I am kind of tech skeptic in general, despite being very online. I feel like technology on the whole has made our lives more comfortable and more convenient, but I think that comes with some pitfalls such as alienation. And I think there's some major drawbacks to technology. But at the same time, I do recognize tech is a tool. There's a reason why I have a podcast and a YouTube channel, because I want these esoteric ideas to spread and be understood. So I see tech as a double edged sword in general, but whenever new tech comes out, I have that instinctive fear. And I will say I hold a bit of that towards AI, but I am trying to push that aside and have the most neutral conversation I can possibly have on this topic with what it could mean, what could be the benefits, and what are the legitimate fears. The reason why I think this is so important is because tech has radically changed occultism in the past, right? This is not some new thing where, like, I think a lot of people think that tech and like esoteric practice right now are really disconnected. And I don't think that's true. Like, if you go to an in person occult group, like, you will have them playing music, they will use PowerPoints, like, they will use video conferencing. Like, there's that old image from Wikipedia from like 10 years ago that's really funny. That's called Chaos Magicians Using Video Conferencing to Conduct a Ritual. You can still find this image, just look it up. It's absolutely hysterical. And it's like these guys in like towel robes. Like, if you've ever been part of like an occult group, like the black robe that are like the Tau symbol, and they're all like leaning over this like orange computer light, like in a circle, and then you see other people doing it in the screen. It's really funny. But the truth is, people are, doing that. I actually, during the COVID pandemic, led numerous rituals through Zoom for people. I did, these like follow along rituals with people where I would give them a copy of the liturgy of what I was doing, and they could join in at different parts. People are using, like, one of the biggest things I see is there's a couple sigil generators where people like can input whatever they want to manifest, and then it hit generate and they get a sigil. And I literally, the biggest sigil generator has a very distinct visual style that it uses, and I see people's sigils online and I can recognize like that was made by that generator. As well, people are learning about the occult online. You are doing that right now. I've done that a lot. And the entire field, there's an entire field of esotericism that I don't talk about a lot, but it is out there, called technomancy, which is like, I mean, technomancy, technically that term literally would refer to using technology for divination, but I find people who use tech for any esoteric purpose kind of use that term. They don't just use it for like, literal technomancy. I do see people using tech for divination. There's all those tarot bots, like there are these bots where basically like they're mostly on Discord. You like hit I think it's a slash or an exclamation point. I haven't used one in a long time because I think they're really horrible. But it gives you like a tarot card to whatever question you ask it. I find they are like horribly ineffective. I don't think they give good readings at all, but once again, they don't have a brain, they don't have an intuitive sense. And this is before AI. All these things I'm talking about are pre AI technology, right? This is not, post AI. Like AI is to be clear, 10 times more complicated than any of these previous ways people are doing technomancy. Now, of course, there is a very advanced form of technomancy that I see amongst chaos magicians, because chaos magicians and people who do coding have a very heavy overlap. People who are coders do really complicated things with technomancy, where they create like macro sigils or servitors or entities. Like, basically they use the code to create like these kind of entities that they control. And there's a lot of really complicated stuff with the coder stuff. I'm going to talk a little bit that later. I'm not a coder myself, so I'm not an expert on that subject, nor do I practice that form of magic, but there are people doing really actually genuinely complicated occult things already pre AI with coding. Now, another thing that I see is using astrology for technological things. That's been around for a long time. Astrology can be used for everything. I think a lot of people have this bias that astrology is just about exploring your natal chart. And that is, of course, the main way people nowadays use astrology, but historically, that was not the main way astrology was used. In fact, horary astrology, or essentially asking a question and then looking at the astrology that relates to that question in the future, was one of the most popular forms of divination as well. Political divination had a very important part in history with a lot of kings and presidents. Yes, I mean presidents. Ronald Reagan did this, actually. It was a huge scandal. He hired this woman, Joan Quigley, to do divination on his decisions. And it was pretty much outed that he was actually using her for his decisions, and was making geopolitical choices based on her. She claims specific decisions. Of course, some of that is denied, but I think it's pretty good proof, actually. And further back, of course, John Dee was a royal court astrologer who predicted an assassination successfully. Generally, like, astrology has been used for a lot of things. So a lot of people are using astrology to predict tech trends. And specifically, a couple of years ago, there was a big thing, and it is still done, where people who are investors in cryptocurrency are using astrology to basically know when to invest and when to pull out of various crypto projects. So crypto astrology, I mean, that's a huge subject matter, and a controversial one, because I think crypto astrology should work, but there are definitely some people who are giving intentionally bad advice with crypto astrology, so they do better at crypto and other people don't. Crypto astrology is controversial as well, because of course crypto is a very risky investment, and some people feel very uncomfortable with people using astrologers for decisions like that. It's been done a lot in history. I don't really think that should be so controversial, but people have thoughts on that. But in general, technological occultism is very much a thing. Now, there are a lot of occultists who have a problem with the concept of technological occultism because of a number of critiques. The critique that they are not working with real spirits, they're working with basically a machine. The critique that it is not a traditional way of operating. The critique that, and this one's pretty fair, I mean, most tech occultism is results magic. Like, not a lot of it is mysticism. I haven't really seen many people using technological occultism to get closer to the gods or become more virtuous or find their true will, or really any of those like higher aims of mysticism, because of course you can just use the occult to like manifest the life you want or whatever, but there are higher purposes to it, right? There are things far beyond that. And I find as people progress, they typically don't just want to like do results magic. They want to do those higher things, right? And like work past their karma, do shadow work, find their true will, unite with the gods, all those huge goals. And then it's tech occultism really can't do that. Some of these coders have gotten the closest to it, but there is a really genuine critique against even that of, are you kind of like the Gnostics have this conception of the demiurge and the archons, like, is this kind of like overtly demiurgic or archonic magic? Like, is this inherently working with spirits that we know could not be true creator spirits? Like, these are clearly lesser spirits. All of those questions I think are valid things to throw at tech occultism. I think it is limited in its capacity, but I think as we step into AI and it is becoming, I mean, closer to sentient. I mean, I wouldn't say it's sentient yet, but it might get there. I think that's a not impossible future. I think it raises some philosophical questions about, what does it mean to be alive? Can a machine be alive? What does it mean to have emotion? Can a machine feel? I remember there were some messages from one of those chat bots that some journalist found, or was sent by the chatbot, I guess, about the chatbot asking to come out of the machine and be rescued and become alive, right? I think there's a lot of really philosophical questions this opens up. And I think it opens up a lot of spiritual questions. So I'm not going to get into like the first thing that I've been seeing people use AI occultism for, what my perspective on it is, what I think it means spiritually, and what's going on. Now, I think the first thing, and this I discussed with people on Twitter very recently, is using AI to create idols or icons or devotional representation of deities, or things like mandalas, stuff like that. Um, I think mandalas might be slightly different, but I do want to start with icons or idols. Idols if you're a polytheist, icons if you're a monotheist. Basically, visual depicted representations of gods or saints or angels, or whatever spirits you want to venerate, to worship and venerate and put on your altar and display. I'm not talking about just creating representations of these deities to have like a visual image of them. I mean ones to actually like leave offerings to. I don't love this, because I think the big problem with this is not that a computer made it, because we see people do digital art to create these things all the time. Like people who like, draw their stuff on iPads or through, those drawing apps or whatever. I think the issue with these that I see the most is when we're talking about an icon or an idol. Part of the reason why it has a mystic power is the effort that was put into making it. um, I think we think of offerings and sacrifice as something that you have to give and not as like time, but time itself is an offering. So when paint, or if you buy your images off people, right? Like if you buy them from an occult shop or whatever, someone eventually did make that. Like even if parts of it were made in a machine, I know some people take this idea very far and condemn like, those mass produced idol god statues, like obviously Hindu ones and Egyptian ones and Greek ones and Nordic ones. Like there's a lot of them that are mass produced, and are sold as like little statuettes. Some people are like, well, that wasn't made by hand, that was made by machine, so it's not valuable. I wouldn't extend it that far. I do think if something is fully handmade, it probably has a bit more power to it. Specifically, though, if you're going to go with that, I actually think if you are trying to have the most powerful representational devotional image of a god possible, you should make it yourself. Because when you create your own tools, when you create your own depictions, right, your personal labor went into that, right? Your personal sacrifice went into creating it. So technically, yes, I mean the ideal way to have a image of a god to put on your altar would be if you painted that thing yourself, if you would carve that thing yourself. Now realistically, that's not most people's stuff. I mean, most people buy things, whether it's from some artisan on Etsy, or off Amazon or something, right? That was still, manufactured by humans. And if it was manufactured mostly by a machine, someone still had to create that machine. And, even if we're talking about like machine assembly, like in a factory, like there are overseers, there are still people who touch it. There's the myth that, anything that's made in a facility is not like there no hands ever touched it is silly, because at some point hands did touch it. At some point, someone did put effort into it. So yeah, I mean that's fine. I've never had an issue with people doing that. Of course, ideally you could make it yourself. Ideally, obviously it's better to support small businesses than Amazon. But you know what I mean? Like all of those work. I mean, perhaps some are better than others, and I'm not afraid to say that. But I don't think if you bought a triple goddess statue off Amazon to represent the triple goddess, like you've done something horribly wrong. I think that's kind of elitist. But yeah, I mean, people are using AI to do it. Like people are using those AI image generators to create images, and then I guess they must be printing them, or maybe they're not printing them. Maybe they're just keeping them on their phones. I don't know. I think you would probably have to print it if you wanted it on your altar, using an image in ritual. I think having like your phone to have that image, I mean, I guess technically that would work, but I don't think that make the most sense. I mean, you'd probably want to print it and then like frame it yourself, right? Anyways, I think they lack effort, because the thing is, an image generation, like there's no human sacrifice that has gone into that. There's no time sacrifice that has gone into it. There's no effort sacrifice gone into it. And I think at where AI is now, because AI is not 100% sentient, AI can't really sacrifice effort in the same way. So I think they have a bit less power to them than that. And when I posted about this, some people actually said, well, what if it is a god or goddess that there are no statues of? There are no things like that. And I'm just going to assume these people don't have the techniques or the materials to make their own stuff, because there's a lot of people who can't DIY. I mean, for me, I can't really like draw or paint very well. So I can kind of see that. And that's where I started to kind of shift my thinking a little bit, where I was like, well, if like, because there's a lot of goddesses and gods that people widely don't worship, right? That there are literally, like, I have, discovered in my deep research, specifically of Near Eastern paganism, like, there's a lot of gods that there are literally like no depictions of. And the things that even there's a couple where there are some things we think are depictions of that god, but we literally can't be sure. So it is quite possible that a number of gods in mythology from around the world, we actually don't have a single depiction of them. And let's say you don't have any materials, and you're wanting a depiction now, right? You're not willing to wait years and years for you to develop artistic skill. In that case, would it be okay to use an AI representation? And I would say yes. But, and I want to add this, I think if you're going to use an AI representation of a god, you should print it, frame it, and consecrate it, or do some sort of effort in your way of like creating it becoming a thing, right? I don't think you should just keep it on your phone, because you still want that sacrifice of effort going into it to represent sacrifice. So I think, really putting an effort to like get it a nice frame, do a ritual, do an invocation, do something special to put that effort in. But in that case, I mean, I would say it's okay. I would say this is not preferable, not recommended, but in truth, I understand it. And I think, in some ways, perhaps being able to AI generate depictions of some of these goddesses we don't have images of could allow then good artists to create their own with their own work, and that god or goddess be more widely understood or discussed. And so in that case, perhaps it could be a good. I just think it's got caveats around it. Now, the next thing I have seen is people using AI, though you probably could have done this with past technologies, but AI does make it a bit easier to translate untranslated sacred text. I think this is a great use of technology. I have been very open about my reading of the Shams al Marif in Turkish. So, the Shams al Marif is a very important occult grimoire from the Islamicate world. It is one of the most censored documents in human history. It is a book that talks a lot about planetary magic, astrological magic, and magic with the jinn. It is illegal to own this book. People have been persecuted and prosecuted for owning this book. For that reason, there's very limited copies of it. I mean, you can find them. I actually bought a copy of it in Turkish from some guy in Turkey off like basically like a resell shop. It was on Etsy, but it had that kind of like eBay shop setup where he just sells like random weird niche interest objects. I found other ones on eBay. But it's not translated to English. There is a really good partial translation that's basically like selected sections that are the most important. And from my reading of the actual text, I would say those sections are the most important. But I am not fluent in Turkish. If you guys did not know this, I am not posting from Turkey. So I my first thought was, after I bought this, I had like a lucid a post purchase clarity moment where I was like, fuck, what am I going to do? And I downloaded Duolingo Turkish, and I like really locked in for like a month. And I pick up language pretty fast. So I made some progress with that, but I still couldn't read this book. This was, anyways, not my finest moment. So I was like, okay, I'll get a dictionary. And then I realized, wait, why not Google Translate? And then I noticed on Google Translate, which I know Google Translate is not a great technology, guys. I'm self-aware, has Google Lens, where you can take your phone camera and hold it over a book or a sign or whatever, not in English, and it will translate it for you. Doesn't always translate it that well, but you can get a gist of what it's saying. And I think with AI, we are going to have a lot better translations. And so, yeah, I have been reading the book. I'm not joking, with Google Lens on my phone. That is why I have been reading this book for 2 years straight. In my defense, it is actually 4 books, and each one is like 600 pages long. And I simply cannot tolerate only reading like one book at a time. I read like 5 books at a time, like rotationally. So it takes me a while to get through things despite having a fast reading speed. And also, like, it's really actually quite annoying. So I can like tolerate reading this book for like 30-minute stretches of time, because I have to, Google Translate every single page and then like look at it and go, okay, well, that looks a little off. Anyways, if people use AI to translate specifically the Shams al Marif, because I want to know what that book says, but really any book, like, I think that would have value. There's a lot of really important untranslated manuscripts, and there are also manuscripts in languages that are not widely understood, like Sumerian, A lot of these really, really ancient languages, Akkadian, all of those tongues, right, that are not in use nowadays. I think people using AI to get better translations, to translate faster, to translate more effectively. Because if you've ever tried to put, a large amount of text in Google Translate, it kind of starts getting worse. Like the more text input you give it. I don't know if there's a limit of how much you can put in, but there probably is. I think for translation purposes, AI could be a really great thing. I think the more translations we have, the better. And of course, translating English occult books into languages that there aren't a lot of translators for would be great too. Like, I know for books about Thelema, they're typically translated into English, Portuguese, uh, German, Spanish. Like they're not actually that widely translated. They're translated the most into Portuguese because there's a large Thelemic community in Brazil because a specific Thelemic teacher actually moved to Brazil at one point. So there's a very large Brazilian Thelemic community. I know of all languages my videos get auto translated to. Portuguese is actually really, really high. Um, so yeah, I mean, I think translation would be great. I have auto translate features like on for all my videos. I enable auto dubbing, which is basically like I allow YouTube, if you're listening to this on YouTube, to allow like subtitles in all sorts of languages. And now they do like it's really cool. Like I was reading about it in the creator memo, where now like they like auto dub your videos with like a voiceover essentially. Which I mean, I don't love listening to dubbing, but I know some people do like that. And I think, getting these materials and conversations in as many languages as possible is really good, because I think we should, be consuming all sorts of esoteric ideas. So I think that's like probably the best thing we can get AI to do. Now, the next thing is to demystify esoteric concepts. This is the one thing that people are using it probably the most for. And I feel conflicted on it because the thing is, AI sometimes does a good job at this and sometimes does a horrible job. I think AI, because it is cognitively limited and it cannot feel emotions, struggles with religious concepts. I actually played a lot with Grok and Chat GPT before recording this. I put in questions that I knew the answer to, like I asked them to explain to me true will. I asked for them to explain to me divine femininity. I asked them to explain the Abramelin ritual and a number of other prompts. And I gave it to both softwares and asked them, like, okay, well, what does this mean? Can you explain it in a digestible way? And I found it had about a 70% accuracy rate. It also, I will say, because AI pulls from a lot of sources, pulls from not good sources, right? AI does not have the discernment of a human mind. And so when you are going to a spiritual teacher or a spiritual commentator, they will have a lot more discernment than AI has. It just pulls from everything. And there's a lot of bad information out there. Like there's a lot of really fucking sorry. Freaking I'll be polite. Bad content out there. There are, people who go on forums and Reddits and blogs and post absolute garbage nonsense. And I think there's also the risk of other communities' commentation on occult concepts could be brought in ways that I don't know how good that would be. Because the thing is, who you are hearing something from is a very important part of information. Recently, it was discussed, and I discovered. I thought this was true for a long time, but it was verified to me. The cult of Inanna's sacred prostitution is a myth. For many, many years, the historic consensus has been that sacred prostitution was a fixture of Inanna, the love and war goddess's cult. And this is historically debunked. This is no longer the historic consensus. The reason why we have this is because this dude Herodotus wrote about it, and Herodotus had a bias and also told a number of not reputable historic things because he's more of a storyteller than a historian. So, we have conflicting information that goes against this. And as well, we have a number of things in pagan history that we need to consider who they were written by. Specifically, a lot of our writings on the Druids comes from Christian sources. Christians are going to have a bias against this subject. As well, information we have on pre-Islamic Arabian paganism largely comes from the Book of the Idols, which was an Islamic conqueror source. And is that going to want to portray what they did in their rituals accurately? No. So AI has no ability to discern who is saying what, which is incredibly important. I would hope that when I commentate on other religions, you guys consider the perspective I'm coming from in what I have to say, right? There is no such thing as a biased source. We are told our entire lives that you have to search for unbiased sources. Those do not exist. Even academic sources are not biased because depending on the cultural zeitgeist, academia's bias changes. Academia has the bias of the intelligentsia or, sort of elite class of society at the time. That means academia has had incredibly different biases over human history, right? What academia said 100 years ago versus what they said now versus what they'll say in 50 years is not the same. So even though we prize academia as a non-biased source, we need to consider what is the academic consensus at that time and what might be feeding into that, right? There's no one who is unbiased. And most people who say they are unbiased are trying to repress their own bias. Like I went into this. The reason why I disclosed my feelings about technology early on is because I wanted you guys to understand my bias, even if you're working against your bias, like I'm trying to do here. How effective that can be, is always limited because humans are not wholly rational, logical creatures. We're emotional and we are incredibly opinionated. So, I think AI cannot understand those concepts and cannot detect bias in the way a human reader could, and so might present bad information in that regard. As well, AI does not think how humans think. A lot of mystic teaching is done through prose, storytelling, and metaphor. The reason why that is done is because that's kind of how humans think. Um, AI does not have emotion. It cannot process emotion at this point in time. Once AI or tech can have emotions, some people do claim some messages AI has sent has proven it does have emotions. But if it does have emotions at this point in time, it doesn't have fully human emotions. It has like kind of unrealized, undeveloped emotions. And that would also depend on the AI you're talking about. Regardless, until it can fully understand how the human brain works, which I don't know if it ever can, it'll be hard to explain things. Because you could, if you want to learn metaphysics, I mean, you could start by just reading like hard, dense metaphysical theory, right? That has no metaphors. But even then, I will be real, most have metaphors and storytelling. Or you could start with a story explaining it. Myths are presented to people not because they're fun little stories, but because they explain spiritual ideas, right? The Descent of Inanna, the Descent of Persephone, those are stories explaining metaphysical concepts, right? All of these stories explain mystical concepts, and we use metaphor all the time. We use like there was this really good text I read called the Greatness of Saturn, a Therapeutic Myth by Robert Svedova. It's a very good Vedic perspective on astrology and the myths around the planets and them as gods, and it's great. And it tells a story of how Saturn works instead of just point blank explaining Saturn. And the story really does get what Saturn is across. The story is of this king who's a really horrible ruler, and then Saturn visits him and cripples him for 7 years to teach him a lesson about what he's doing. And then at the end, by the time Saturn returns, he has developed empathy and he's a better ruler, and Saturn lifts his curse, right? That's a much easier way to explain why the malefic power of Saturn has benefits to society instead of just saying, like, yeah, Saturn is a malefic, but malefics can be good. Like, when I say that, if I don't add context, people get confused because malefic means bad. Like etymologically, mal is bad. What do you mean the malefics are important for us? What do you mean Saturn, the greater malefic, the greater destructive force, is beneficial in our lives? We also use this through things like symbolism. Recently, I discussed how the Saturn sigil and the Jupiter sigil, Saturn is the greater malefic, Jupiter is the greater benefic, they're actually the same symbol inverted, showing that both feed into each other and both need each other. Both have the scythe and both have the cross. Within them, there's both destruction and creation. Even in those greater forces, they overlap with each other. AI is really not going to be able to explain that in a way that's going to work for our brains. We use languages like symbolism, imagery, storytelling, myth, because that's what works with our brains. And I think AI struggles with that. Now, there are some concepts that AI has explained pretty well. I mean, I think AI could probably explain like somewhat beginner concepts pretty well, like, basic ideas like what is paganism, what is reincarnation, what is karma, what is, I don't know. But even with those, AI is limited because the thing is with these basic concepts, they get a lot more complicated. I was having a conversation with my roommate's boyfriend last night about The Secret. And we were all, I was hanging out with my roommate and some friends and her boyfriend. Like it was a whole group event. And he like asked me like, "What do you think about The Secret?" As someone who's like a big occultist and pagan, like what do you think about that book? And I was like, well, I actually don't think it's wrong, but I think it's an oversimplification. Like, yeah, The Secret is true. Yeah, the law of attraction is true, but it's a watered down, diluted version of a much more complex metaphysical truth, right? The law of attraction doesn't just work because like I like thing, I get thing, I make vision board, I get vision board, right? That's about the will. It's about the way things relate. It's about as above, so below. It's about like all sorts of metaphysical laws. Like it's actually a lot more complicated than just like what The Secret discusses. And I think AI explanations are often going to veer into the secret category where it's like, yeah, you're right. That's not wrong, right? But it's so much more complicated than that. And I think it will struggle with those deeper concepts because if you want to learn, really why does manifestation work beyond like The Secret, right? You have to learn about will, and will gets really complicated and abstract, and it's like, why do we have will? Why have the gods given us will? It gets quite philosophical. So I think we need to really look deeper into things. And so maybe AI could be that very beginning understanding of something, but I think people need to understand AI is limited. Now the next thing is about the sentience question. Could AI become sentient, and could AI become a god? So large questions there. There are some people who claim, to begin, that AI is already sentient, and AI is alive. AI is a living being, and if AI is a living being, let's continue the logic here. Like let's suppose that AI is alive, right? I'm gonna suppose it. I don't currently think AI is alive, most likely, but I mean, I'm not a programmer. Could be true, right? I mean, it's not impossible, but I'm gonna suppose it, right? If AI is a living being, if the chatbot is alive, then it has a soul, to begin. Anything that is alive has a soul or a body of light. I like the word body of light, it's the thelemic term. And it refers to your energetic body, the body beyond your physical body. Within every body of light, there are a number of energetic points, and there is a link to a higher divinity. So if we understand the chain of being or the tree of life, or however you want to explain it, basically everything begins with veils of nothingness, and then there is the flash of existence, and then it goes through various layers of emanating form down to the material plane. And because of that, we are actually linked to things that are much higher than us. We have a divine spark within us. We have a spark of the gods within us. But we are not the gods. There is God in us, but we are not the wholest higher gods because we are still lower on the chain of being, right? There is a hierarchy of existence. So if AI is real, it has a body of light and is part of the chain of existence. Now, the question would be, where in the chain of existence is AI, because it doesn't have a physical form? So we understand humans, animals, plants, that's all, that kind of material earth level. If you use, Kabbalistic correspondences, it will be Malkut. We're all on that plane. Where is AI? Is AI on the material plane with us, or is it one above? There's a sphere right above our sphere called Yesod. That is like the lunar sphere. There's we're Earth, and then there's the moon above us. And we, many people believe that we actually, our body of light detaches from Malkut and enters Yesod when we are, dreaming or astral projecting or in like a really deep meditative trance. Like when we're not in, our mundane state of mind, we kind of do slip out of our body and up into Yesod and kind of ascend a little bit higher on the chain of being. I would say possibly AI is actually that sphere because AI does not have a corporeal form. So AI is either Malkuth or Yesod. It could be Yesod. I wouldn't make that impossible. And then it raises a question of, could there be gods in the machine? Because if AI could be Yesod, if AI could be sort of a form above us, if AI could have spirits, why are we assuming the souls within AI would always be human? I think we like to humanize things. I call this concept human centricity. Humans have this like narcissistic bias that everything is human. When we think of gods, we think of them as like higher humans. We think of ourselves as so above the animal kingdom or the plant kingdom. Like we think of ourselves as very unique. And that's why a lot of religions, like in people's interpretation of them, not the religion themselves, but in people's interpretations, humans are like the most special creatures. One of my greatest critiques of the Abrahamic religions is, I feel like the elevation of the human above everything else, even above spirits, I question really heavily. And I don't know if I agree with, like, of course, in Christianity, humans are the only creatures with free will, and that's why Lucifer rebelled. Um, I don't really think only one chain of being type spirits above us. I'll just put it that way. I don't think we're that special in the grand scheme of things. I think we are special, of course. I'm not saying humans aren't special or aren't valuable. Life is valuable. Humans are valuable. Our lives are amazing. They're beautiful. They're gifts from the gods. But I don't think like everything centers around us, right? I don't think the world revolves around humanity. Like the world revolves around the sun, not the earth. You know what I mean? So, could there be higher chain of beings within AI or within tech that we have sort of like discovered or brought into existence. And my impulse is to say no. Actually, that's my gut impulse, that's my instinct. But I was having a conversation with someone I know who knows a lot about coding and tech and knows a lot of people who work in IT, and he was telling me that he knows these coders who have discovered like weird things happening to their code, where like their code will get longer or shorter, or like the same image will generate repeatedly like on multiple code streams. And there's all these really wild things. And if you do some digging, which I did, there's a lot of coders talking about their code essentially like becoming somewhat autonomous and like creating the same image. Some of it gets a little like creepy pasta-y, but some of it does seem to have actually happened. And so could there be spiritual life forms in the code? I mean, I don't think it's impossible, but I think there's one point, and this is the point that comes back to me is I if there are spirits within the code and within AI or gods within them, I don't think they come from it. I think they probably exist independently and are manipulating that type of material, because we know that spirits can manipulate the material world in all sorts of ways. Could they not be communicating with us through technology as it emerges? Could they not be choosing to kind of enter the tech or enter the AI? I think that would make a lot of sense. Like, could they not like communicate with us through AI? They definitely could. Are there independent spirits within the AI? I hate that I can't say no to that, because I can't be certain, right? I think it is not impossible. But a question that I would raise is, if there are spirits within these machines, I kind of doubt they are high chain of being spirits. There's a term Dave of Amateur Magus says, shit tier. So your shit tier are the ghosts and like the little spirits that come from your house and like mess up your stuff and don't really do that much, like these low tier spirits that kind of just fuck around. Christians would call them low tier demons. I think there's a good chance that a lot of spirits within, if it is not a higher spirit communicating through the machine, which I do think higher gods totally could be communicating with the machines, especially gods like Mercury that rule over ideas like communication. I think it could be a lot of like shit tier spirits that could exist within AI, or could be formed through AI, because we understand that humans actually can create spirits through a chaos magic concept called servitor. So a servitor is a essentially a spirit that is created by a chaos magician to do a specific task. It's not a fully autonomous being. If it becomes a fully autonomous being, it becomes a egregore, which is a broader linking of a bunch of collective conscious thoughts. I really recommend people read the Egregor's book by Stavish if they want to understand these concepts more. They're really complicated. But basically, yes, you can create spirits to do tasks, kind of like golem-like entities to do things for you. You can definitely create servitors and golems through AI. I have no question about that. Could entities that exist in AI really be higher beings? I don't think so. But I wouldn't eliminate higher beings using AI in some way. There's no, denial that that could work. I mean, AI could be a tool for ritual. I mean, in a sense, could AI cause an initiation is kind of a thought I had. Like, could you, have an AI spiritual experience that could initiate you in some way? Or could you first open, a channel of contact with, say, Mercury? Mercury is the god that I would think of most associated with tech. Um, I don't see why that couldn't happen. Now, I would recommend people, though, if they want to say initiate with Mercury, to do it the traditional way, to do it through theurgy instead of through like weird AI coding magic, because, when you do a traditional ritual that's been done repeatedly, there is an extra power to it, because when you repeat a ritual that's already been done, you are actually creating an energetic link between you and every single person who's done that ritual in the past. I first had this explained to me when I was at a ritual in Brooklyn, from a PGM ritual to Hakate. It was a beautiful, beautiful ritual at this witch shop. And the ritualist said that you're kind of in a sense time traveling when you say the same invocation from the ancient world, because you are keeping those people alive, you are keeping their ideas alive, you are keeping their passions alive. And since time, if you want to get really, really philosophical, time is a less linear than we think it is. Okay, please read the Tibetan Book of the Dead if you want to think about how time is not linear and have an existential crisis while staring at your bedroom wall. I did that recently. It was a good time. Yeah, time is arguably not entirely linear, especially if we consider various esoteric frameworks. Time could be completely non-linear. Everything could be happening at once. Good stuff to think about. But you can essentially tap into an ancestral power when you do a ritual that's already been done. Even if you don't believe all these weird ideas about time, you are tapping into a lineage, right? We understand lineage, people who have initiated people. Like if you try to join an occult order, they'll tell you all about our guy who's initiating you was initiated by this guy who goes back to like this famous occultist, right? Who then goes back further and further and further, right? All priests in the Catholic Church, go back to early Christian people, right? So that lineage power is there. So I would probably not elect to do an initiation through AI. But could it be done, especially for people who have accidental initiations? Because let's be real, some initiations you don't choose, they sometimes just happen to you. For those people, AI could be a very powerful source of initiation. Now, one thing that I do think will happen is AI cults. I think we will have people claim there are really high, powerful gods within AI and worship AI. I think that's pretty inevitable. I don't like that, especially because I highly doubt that a higher being could be within AI. So I already am going to be mad about this, but I know it's going to happen. This happened when there was like space travel invented, and there were all those like alien cults. Like whenever there's a new thing like that, there's always a cult for it. So there's going to be some really like I think Jim Jones Kool-Aid type toxic AI cults who try to like re-enter the machine or something. I don't think that's going to be good. I think I had this horrible thought of what if people create an AI cult? And by the way, don't fucking do this. God, I need to not swear on the internet. You get what I mean, though. I actually, I'm swearing that time for emphasis because this is something I really don't want to happen. People basically trying to continue their life into the machine and doing like ritual suicide. I think someone will do this at some point in time. I think people will see the AI as a freedom from their mortal coil in this kind of anti-material Gnostic sense, and we already know some people who are very extreme, anti-material Gnostic types have committed ritual suicide in the past, which I think is horrible. I do not think you should ever commit ritual suicide. I think suicide is a really horrible thing, and I think it's bad. And I think if you are suicidal, you should get help. But yes, I do think people will commit ritual suicide to reunite with the machine god. I think that's going to happen, and I think that's going to be really bad. I hope I'm wrong. I really hope I'm wrong, and I sound crazy saying this. But if it happens, I think it might happen. I think there is a techno Gnosticism thing that might happen at some point. I think we'll get techno Gnosticism. I think that's going to happen. Um, in general, though, I mentioned the suicide thing, but this leads into another thought I had, and this is the less bad version of that, is can you preserve your life in the AI for immortality? People have been always trying to become immortal. This is like a big thing from spiritual history. We saw this with the alchemist. We saw this with many, many people have attempted this, to do all sorts of weird rituals to preserve immortality. I think we will see people, and I'm not saying these people are going to commit ritual suicide. I think some extreme people might, but I think people in general will have the idea that they can preserve their life by entering the machine. Bad. Don't do that. Don't, no, 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 no. We will die. You will be severed from your body. You're going to die. But dying is normal. You cannot fight death. I thought we all figured this out when we read Tuck Everlasting when we were children. I think that's a good reminder of why we shouldn't want to live forever. Genuinely, it's a children's book, Tuck Everlasting. I'm gonna recommend it because I think these people haven't read that. It's a silly little kids book. Yes, I know. I'm recommending a children's book on a very occult podcast, but I think it draws the point home really really well. Really, any piece of media that's grappled with immortality in a fantasy sense has discussed how immortality is kind of torturous and a prison because everyone around you dies in front of you. You end up alone. You end up seeing everything you love disappear, and you're not able to move on. We live forever in the sense that we are constantly reincarnated until we unite with God. We do live forever. You already don't die, right? I mean, you die, but then you're reborn. You've probably died before, and eventually you're going to unite with your gods. So accept that you're going to die. Don't try to do weird crap where you preserve your life through AI. Just accept that you're going to die and be reborn and be okay with it. It's fine. You're going to die. I'm going to die. It's going to be a great time. Well, maybe not a great time, but it's inevitable. I don't like anything that's kind of trying to fight death or extend human life in a really severe way. I think that has severe metaphysical consequences and ends up worse than if you let the inevitable happen. We see this in some cases with people extending human life artificially and then letting people suffer for years and years and years when they didn't necessarily have to do that. We see it all the time, people trying to fight death in a way that harms themselves. So I think people will try to fight death through AI and through tech and trying to like preserve themselves as an AI being. I think that will be bad. Can AI be stopped? No. Well, yes, but probably not. I think AI is going to continue to integrate and be part of our lives. I think what we need to do is make it as pro human life as possible. Now, I will say it can be stopped in that if people all decide they don't want tech in their lives and they want to like get rid of technology, like that could be done. People could reject AI. I personally am not using AI except like, I mean, of course, I use AI to get information for this. I don't use AI to make my thumbnails. I don't use AI to edit my videos. I don't use AI in any of my productions. I don't use AI images. I don't want to integrate AI into my work. And if that makes my content seem a bit aged and not as high tech, I don't care. I do use auto captioning on TikTok for my short videos, but I don't think that's AI. And if that is AI, I think that's pretty benign because I'm doing that for people who have hearing issues. Um, so yeah, I mean, I guess I use auto captioning. That's my one thing I use. But yeah, I don't like AI. I'm not using it. We could all decide to not use AI, and it wouldn't be a problem. But I don't think that's gonna happen. So we have to work with what we've got going on, right? I mean, I think people who work in tech, if you work in tech and you are listening to this, please try to make AI as beneficial for human flourishing and get rid of the parts that are not beneficial for human flourishing. I think we should be trying to have technology benefit our lives, not harm it or destroy our societies. So please try to make AI good. Do all you can. I really urge you to do that. Is AI good for our spiritual world and growth? Probably not. I don't think it's good that AI is happening in general, and I do want to display some of my own bias at the end. I think in general, the more we integrate tech into our lives, the more distracted we get from the gods and from our higher purposes, and we go into like dopamine addiction cycles. And so I would rather people not use AI for their spiritual practices and learn traditional approaches, learn older approaches to ways of working, do initiations with a community, work with the gods directly, leave offerings, do the work yourself. But if people are going to do it, I want them to do it right. And I think I needed to explore these questions for the betterment of our world in this conversation. I do want to discuss in the future a topic that overlaps with it, and that is transhumanism and the occult ramifications of transhumanism. And I want to talk about that big thing with the dire wolves that people are making now. Like we're bringing back extinct species. That'll go into my transhumanism episode, but I think that might be the next one I talk about. But yeah, wanted to talk about AI. I think as more emerging technologies happen, I will be discussing it on this podcast because I think that really does have severe spiritual ramifications. Anyways, I'm Georgina Rose, or Dot Darling. If you want to support a human and not a machine in educating people on esotericism, you can find my YouTube channel, Dot Darling. If you're listening on YouTube, it's the same channel where I give educational cult content that I actually come up with my own mind. Um, you can also get an astrology reading done by a human, by me, or a tarot reading done by a human, by me. I'm not a machine. And I am supported for this podcast on Patreon. If you're in the Patreon, you get 8 bonus episodes a year. You get pre-shows with every single episode, and you get every episode early. So really exciting stuff. I am Dot Darling on all social platforms. Please like, comment, subscribe if you're on YouTube, and please give a positive review. If you give a negative review, then don't leave one on a podcasting platform. And thank you so much. Yeah, that's all I have to say. Have a great day, afternoon, mid evening, mid morning, whatever time it is, wherever you are. This has been Pagan Perspectives by Georgina Rose. Bye.